everyone, and welcome to the KTH AI Society podcast. And I am Sruti, and in this episode, we are welcoming Jerry Rees, who has been directing live action, animation, and multimedia feature films, and also several mixed media attractions for Disney theme park activities for past decades. And amongst many other things, Jerry has won the Thea Award for most innovative use of technology and directing animation magic, and has worked as a creative lead on Walt Disney's robotics project QV, and as a lead research and development image engineer for Disney Research. And yeah, so being a visual thinker and a fan of animation and movies, I find it very interesting to hear journey from someone who started as an animator and now doing emerging technology research and interactive storytelling. So yeah, it's needless to say, I'm very excited and nervous also. And yeah, welcome to, yeah.
Thank you.
So
Well, that beginning in animation was very appropriate because certainly in the Disney tradition, they tried for something in the early days to set their animation apart from the competitors. And the thing they unlocked so well was to show behaviors in their characters that made you feel like they had thoughts and feelings inside of them, and that they were behaving, their behavior made you think that they were alive. And then you forgot they were drawings and became emotionally attached to them. So this same endeavor we're doing now as we dig into AI, companion characters and all of that, it was really born in those days of trying to make the characters behave in such a way that you believed that they were thinking and feeling living characters, and you didn't think about the technology behind it. And now we're trying to do the same thing with AI. So to me, it was just a perfect seed planted for the continued growth now.
Yeah. So talking about AI, maybe you can discuss tell us more about your journey, like how things has been changing from say 10 years ago. Also things were a bit different. Like right now we have like VR, AR, things like that also, and creative technology and robotics also getting involved. So maybe, yeah, if you tell me a little bit more about the whole thing.
Right. Well, it's really interesting. AI it's developing in so many different directions, and some people sort of describe it as almost like a God-like omnipresent sort of awareness that communicates with us, and we all sort of tap into this one thing. The thing that I've been most intrigued by and involved with is very different from that. It's trying to create individual companion characters that you believe are one of a kind, are not just an archetype, but have their own eccentric self. And if that's either with a completely new created character or trying to be true to an iconic character that's been created. Like if you meet Winnie the Pooh, you expect Winnie the Pooh to have a certain kind of personality, and very different from if you meet Eeyore or Piglet. They should really be themselves. And that's not only in terms of what's written for them. So a lot of early AI stuff I encountered was mostly text to speech in terms of expressing a character. And I really pushed heavily to include physical behavior, body language, expression. And, the theory I kept pushing was your character expresses as much to you when it's not talking as when it is talking. So as it's just listening to you, if you're talking to me and I start to back up and I fold my arms and I fiddle and I do other things, it's like I'm telling you a lot. But if you're telling me a story and I get closer and I get very engaged and I can't wait to hear the next thing, that's telling you so much. None of that is dialogue. None of that is text. And I was seeing so much just depending on text. And for a character to say, "Oh, I'm happy," and my tendency is to say, don't have it say it's happy. Have it say something else, but have it act happy. Have its behavior show and prove that it's being happy. So I was pushing heavily to try to get systems to adopt behavior, physical behavior, to be a manifestation of the inner thoughts and feelings, to make sure that that was continuous beyond text, and you sort of give in dialogue and have the system designers get ready to prove its feelings through its behavior all the time, and then to either agree with that behavior or disagree with that behavior through its dialogue some of the time. So a character could just be feeling so happy and not say I'm happy, but say, oh, what a beautiful day. So it's, you know, they're happy, they're talking about the day, you understand the two. Or you have a character say, oh, I'm feeling just fine. But as they're saying, I'm feeling just fine, they're fidgeting and break their pencil in half. So their behavior is contradicting what they're saying. They're saying they're fine, their behavior is proving they're not fine. So those kinds of design, just accommodating where those things would happen in an AI system is a really interesting and tricky discussion. And it's something I've had a lot of fun with teams talking about. How many things, how do you design a system that keeps a character's individuality intact so they don't become generic, they stay uniquely themselves, not just archetype, but eccentrically one of the archetypes. And then how do you make it continuously express itself through behavior and not just generated text to speech, done. To me, that kind of effort, as important as it has been, if you just stay there, the physical manifestation of the character is just like a radio that looks fancy. It's like you can carve a Winnie the Pooh or carve a Baby Groot or carve whatever character you want and make it as gorgeous physical thing that you walk up to. But if it's not behaving and expressing with that physical self, it's just a speaker for text to come out of. To me, that you just built a fancy radio. It's not really a character at all until it can behave and express itself. And when it's not talking at all, listen with real expression and prove how it feels about what you're saying when it's not talking at all.
And like talking about the character behavior, so in normal acting, when it is not animation, people do several takes, right, to get the right behavior, like body language in the certain, emotion. So how is the process in animation? Is it like same, like several takes? Because I feel like for one scene, it will take a long journey to get a one final gorgeous skin.
When I go back to my days of strictly being an animator, absolutely you do multiple takes to get it right. It takes you much longer. When you're acting it, it happens in the moment and it either bubbles up and is wonderful or not. For that moment of it bubbling up, it might be 4 days, it might be 2 weeks. But then you sit back and you look at the results of what you did. And if that spark of life isn't there, you have to go back and figure out why isn't it coming through? What do I have to do differently? And most of the answer has to do with emotions and expressions of emotion. And sometimes it's a technical explanation, but most of the time, the same technology, but applied by different people in different ways, will express itself differently. So the solution is usually tapping more deeply into whatever emotional space you're trying to. And do that next take, try to feel it more deeply. I know both as an animator and as a writer, sometimes when I've been feeling emotions, trying to express the emotions to the character, I'll feel it in myself after a while. Like a character's deliriously happy, I'll be sitting there smiling while I'm working and I'll feel so good. And I've been writing a screenplay late at night and working on a scene that's sad, and I'll actually have tears coming out of my eyes, and I'll realize I'm feeling the sadness that I'm expressing through this character. So I think if we try to really acknowledge the emotion that should be apparent in the character and try to feel it, it really helps us push the tools and push the systems to make that happen. Because if it's not happening, we try to figure out what's wrong with the system that's not allowing the emotion to come through, and it becomes a very interesting discussion with your system designers.
Yeah. So for the process, I would like to know, like, which technologies do you use generally in AI? Say, like,
I have not I'm really agnostic about that. I've worked with different teams who all have, a lot of times, proprietary systems that they are developing in secret, so they don't want me to talk about it on a podcast like this. But I haven't found any of them to be a specific problem or a specific benefit. I've worked with all kinds of things that people have experimented with, but the valuable discussion becomes, no matter what system you're using, how are you prompting, how are you taking all the sensors that you have available to inform the character about what's going on in the world around it? How do you then process all of that? How much of it needs to be expressed and come back out of the character, and how is it filtered through individual personality of a character? I'll take you back to one example that seems a little bit more ordinary in a way, because it's not big entertainment, but it unlocked the same puzzle that we encountered in trying to bring iconic characters to life in entertainment. And that was, I was approached quite a few years ago. I had been doing augmented reality projects in 2011. I'd been pushing for more immersive worlds back in 2007 and going around pitching that around the world. And so as people became aware that that a little team and I were playing in that area, we were approached by somebody who's a nutritionist and personal physical trainer to people. And he made quite a reputation working with film stars and trying to get them healthy and in good shape. And he was a brave early adopter of wanting to have a surrogate version of himself to go out to the people he was training. Because he said, I have more clients approach me than I can even deal with. So I would like to have an AI version of me replicated that can go out and be training. Now, I'm not trying to fool people. They will know it's my AI self, but I don't want him to see some fantasy character. I've worked really hard. The guy had worked really hard. He had become like a Mr. Universe and stuff. And so he was proud of what he looked like. And that was part of his brand was, you could be as healthy looking as me if you follow my principles. So he didn't want a cartoon of him. He didn't want a centaur or a fairy or a monster. He wanted him. And so he wanted an accurate avatar. And then he also did not want us to build in a Google search for answers to anything. He wanted to make sure that the sphere of knowledge for his character was all contained within the books he had written. It's because that's what he was vouching for. It's like, no, it's like somebody else's solution. If you Google and somebody else has a health principle, not what I want you to even know about. I want you to know only about the things I've written in my books. So that means you're having to build a system that has a more contained archive of knowledge for that character to even search and to keep it true to his personality and all of that. And of course, he wanted to then be alerted when there was any sort of serious health crisis for a person where he would personally step in and take over for his AI character. But that thing of wanting individuality and wanting even a sphere of knowledge and set of opinions that were unique to him and not reach out further into the sort of the Google search realm was pretty unique at the time we were talking about it. But recently in dealing with, with Disney, I can't get into specifics, but there's a lot of iconic characters. There's Mickey and Minnie and Donald and Goofy and Pooh, and nowadays the one they've announced is Baby Groot that I was involved with the Kiwi project. But with those characters, you have the same challenge where you need it to be true to itself, to look like and behave like itself. And then as you have companionship with it, to have it not retrieve answers in general from sort of a mass data accumulation of what millions of people might say, because Winnie the Pooh has a certain curated view of the world as opposed to Mickey, who has a different curated view of the world. So trying to take any of the systems that were being used, you asked about what systems I used. I would just go across the board to all the different teams that were working and take them through exercises of character expression, the psychology of a character, for us to prove if we have enough fine-grained beats of how it's showing what it's thinking so that you get it. And, so those exercises would bear fruit in whatever system they were working with.
Is it more about like storyboarding in the first place? Then after that, that storyboarding goes into like the technical team, something like that?
Sometimes I would just I would do sometimes a bullet point of reminders of a philosophy of how to get into it. Sometimes it would be a collection of storyboards to show how behaviors would happen. Sometimes it was an actor coming in and working with me in front of the camera or in a motion capture space. Sometimes it was a CG animator that was a character animator to come in and do some exercises in breaking down the little moments of the spark of life, I call it, being evident, so that if somebody experiences this and sees the character, is around the character, without knowing any of the homework we put into it, it should be self-evident what the character is feeling. And like one example is there was a discussion about meeting an AI character, and the initial listed item on their system was a wave hello. Like that was the meeting of the character, was that. So I took them through an exercise where I said, well, a wave is one thing a character might do. It might just be a smile, it might be a thumbs up, it might be any number of things. So I would not do a wave. I would call it a greeting. And instead of it being one item on the system chart, I would put 6. So your character is busy with an activity, because usually in immersive experiences, the characters are not just waiting for you to interrupt, to talk to them. So they're just waiting at a screen. They're usually busy with something. And when you approach, they're in the middle of whatever they're doing, and then they turn to address you. So just quickly through the 6 beats, one is I'm involved with an activity, and it's either I'm feeling some emotional way. I'm either happy with what I'm doing or frustrated with what I'm doing, but I am in an activity. And now you might open a door, as is happening behind me. I think I hear the door opening. My wife is going to come walking through in a second. But that's a perfect example. I'm aware that somebody is coming in. So awareness, somebody's approaching. Look, it's a perfect demo. But I don't know who it is yet. So maybe I was working on something very frustrating, and I feel like, so I'm aware. That's beat 1. Beat 2 is like, why now? Then the 3rd beat is look to see who it is. And the 4th beat is how do I feel about them? Happy. And then I either go back to my activity, 5th beat, or 6th beat, completely turn and address them with whatever is an appropriate greeting for them. So those 6 beats of just aware of an interruption, how do you feel about being interrupted right now? It could be positive or negative. And then discover who it is. How do you feel about that person approaching you? Either retreat to your activity or give it up and engage with them. And then whatever the 6th beat would be, whatever greeting is appropriate, as rapport points have been building between you and whoever that character is. It could be a give me a hug gesture. It could be a wave hello, or you could have retreated entirely back to what you're doing. It's like, hi, you see a little, I don't want to deal with you. So to take a group that's designing a system and take one list on their bullet point, and whether you use storyboards or actors or going through it yourself or animation, whatever, the bottom line is they have to get back to their system and go, is the greeting of a person one beat, which is just whatever you're doing, it automatically is wave with whatever character, or do you go into that fine grain and go, measure how they're feeling right now, and then as input comes from the world, step by step go through it. I'm aware of it, of interruption. How do I feel about being interrupted now? Who's interrupting me? How do I feel about them? Should I retreat into what I'm doing or fully engage with you? And then whatever greeting is appropriate, it blooms. So that thinking, however you present it in storyboards or acting or animation, was a key to have people think about how fine-grained a system would need to be built in order for you to truly feel the spark of life from a character. Now, those things could be very bluntly done, and I had some animation done where we took a character clearly through those, where we could just see each one of them clearly happen, and it absolutely tracked emotionally. It felt absolutely believable. But you could blend those so they're more subtly apparent. Just if you really look for them, you see those little flashes. But if you take them out, if you just go auto turn and wave, oh, that, you know, it's really deceptive, because you feel like, well, the character moved, it waved to me, the story beat happened. But I'll tell you that, you know, as you take out those little sparks of intelligence and emotion from the character, just that spark of life disappears, and it goes back to something that's moving. It was an animated character and it moved. You stop feeling like it had thoughts. It was thinking and feeling. It's like, no, it was moving and saying, which is a whole different thing.
So in the, like, before this process, what my personal experience is like when I'm reading a storybook, or, you know, like listening to music and thinking random screens, you know, that happens. So like I always, like, for me personally, I found it very like difficult to express my thoughts in the proper writing words. So that's why I jumped into animation. I thought, like, yeah, like animation will be better to express than the word, right?
That is a wonderful tool. And I sat actually with a room full of people that were brilliant. I think most of them had PhDs, and they were in this science of emotion, characters and AI and all of that. But I took them through a scene of the first Wreck-It Ralph, where Ralph is in a Badanon meeting, where he's sitting around with the other villainous characters, and he's trying to express how he feels. And I went scene by scene and showed them that every single motion from Ralph, every single expression was absolutely thought out and was there for a reason. None of it was like random movement or averaged, you know, mass data movement. It was, he feels a specific way, and through behavior and expression and sometimes dialogue, he was clearly expressing hope, he was expressing disappointment, he was expressing curiosity, he was expressing resentment, all those different things. And when you stop and would go back and forth through and go, watch this happen, this shape is going to droop. It's like you're going to see him sink back and his shoulders droop, and watch that happen. That is an expression in pantomime of sort of the deflation of hope. And, you know, we'd go back and go through it, and they go, oh my God, there it is. I would never have even noticed that that was going on. And it's a purposeful choreography every moment. So to have people whose job it was to build these systems, and they had high degrees in studying how to make this happen. But if you back up and have them all gather around, as you're saying, a piece of animation that clearly shows the event happening, it sort of proves the case. It was very helpful, very instructive, and a lot of people really, I think, took lessons from that into their work, how they thought moving forward. So you're right; it's a very, very effective tool.
Yeah, yeah. And another thing, like talking about the body expression things, and so like now that I'm studying, like after knowing the things like VR, AR existence, things like that, I get to know about, you know, like visual computing stuffs. Like for example, how object detection kind of things are like helping actors to like translate the acting to a animation animation character or something like that. So like, do you use those things also, or how is the process in general? Like, is it like more about animation and without actors, or with the actors also?
You know, it depends on what project you're doing. If it's a very cartoony character that you're doing that is meant to be, because there's sort of a threshold of characters where in so much of character animation, when it's a little more cartoony, it's not meant to be a documentary of what a certain feeling looks like. Like, let's say that a character is terrified and they run out of the room. If you're sitting there in the theater and you see the character just get a sort of a terrified look on their face for a few frames and then just become a blur and papers are blowing, and you hear the door slam, you feel like, yes, that's exactly how I feel when I'm terrified. So you feel like it is perfectly summing up a sort of a caricature of your emotions. It's not trying to do a documentary of what you see. So if you took the same moment of a terrified character zipping out, and you had even a brilliant actor get in a suit and do motion capture of that, and they would run out of the room, you go like, yeah, that's what it looks like when somebody is terrified. But when you do it through caricature and animation, it's what it feels like when somebody is terrified. So, some things fall into that category where your whole intention is the caricature of emotion, and you don't want to do something akin to rotoscope. There are many other cases, and I've used an actress, Stasha Surdijk, repeatedly. She was our on-screen character for Soaring Fantastic Flight in Tokyo Disneyland, and she was our Camelia Falco character. So she's done on-screen stuff, but she has done a lot of things sort of in the laboratory with us doing experiments with motion capture. And there are a lot of characters who either you're getting into a Star Wars or Marvel universe where you have very hyper-realistic characters that just, like Tony Stark is not a cartoon, So you step into that realm, or you deal with robotics. Like on the Kiwi project, we had, at the end of our process, we had to have a character who deals with real physics. So Kiwi could not zip in 2 frames and be out the door. Kiwi has to try not to fall down for real because it's autonomous free walking. So in that case, motion capture was super useful. And I was never, back in the early days of animation, I was never a fan of rotoscope whatsoever, especially just the rote tracing of it. Sometimes if you used it a foundation and you caricatured off of that, it could be useful. But I think a lot of times it became a crutch where there was just tracing. Some of my friends put motion capture in that same category of rotoscope, which they hate. It's like that. I don't feel that way. I feel like there are many appropriate uses for motion capture. However, just one of us putting the suit on and moving around is not going to do the trick.
Yeah.
You need to get like actors that you love, actors and actresses that you think have brilliant in full body language all the way down to micro expressions, and go, that person really does something special when they perform. Now, a few of them are able to keep that performance happening in motion capture space. Some of them are distracted by putting the equipment on. But I remember like when Ellen Page put those things on in it was Beyond Two Souls, the video game that she was in a few years ago. I so appreciated that Ellen Page was just truly performing as she usually would. When they put the motion capture stuff on her, she didn't like do extra movements or anything. She just continued to perform well. So Stasha does that same thing. And so I have often used motion capture space with an actor who's doing a really wonderful performance. And we did something with, even that seems as technical as phonemes and visemes and breaking down mouth shapes for a character, where I made it an emotional context, and I wrote a story. I took all the likely words for phonemes and visemes to be pronounced, and I took all the list of words, and then I regrouped them into a story. So they all happened, but in a continuous story. And my point was, if you say the same word, but with a different emotion, your mouth is shaped differently. So I would take her through a whole roller coaster of emotional change while the phonemes and visemes were happening in front of the capture device. And so we went into like a high-end motion capture device with technicians in the dark, waiting for it to happen. And they didn't expect that it was going to be an emotional journey like that. And a couple of them had like tears in their eyes they were wiping out at the end. And they didn't expect, I thought this was a technical thing happening today. I didn't realize it was emotion. So more and more, I'm trying to coax, even in motion capture space and in true like dimensional capture space of the, detailed micro expressions of the face, to see, what is emotional expression beautifully done what is that like? How can we draw that in to have systems move beyond archetype and mass data, to have certain eccentricities parked on top of the mass data, to spark through and let this character really be him or herself or itself beautifully, and proof that it has thoughts and feelings going on inside of it.
Yeah. So you just reminding me about I watched Moana, and
Mhm.
there the welcome song, exactly that song was recording by the actor, and I saw the both. So it is just the actor, the way he was expressing and while he's singing the song, exactly like more or less that way the actual
Right,
animation character was singing it. So
right,
you're reminding me about those screens I was like watching it last
right.
year, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, we
And
went way back in the earlier days in 1989. I directed a short film, and it was the first use of Robin Williams in animation. It was just before they cast him in Aladdin. So our little team of animators watched, I videotaped the recording session I had with Robin, and they tried to really get his gesture palette in the animation. And it made a big difference. You really felt like in the film it's called Back to Neverland, and it played at Disney MGM Studios for many years, for probably 15 years. But it was, you meet him in live action, and then you see him step by step become a cartoon character. And once he's a cartoon character, you still feel Robin inside of it. And we didn't do it with rotoscope because he was a very cartoony version of himself. But the animators paid close attention, like you were saying, with the scene from Moana, where they tried to really not make generic movements, but to make Robin specific movements, and it
yeah,
really, really made him come alive.
yeah, exactly. And about like, for example, you talked about one word in different tones, right? So yeah, that one also reminding me of some like movie I watched in India that is like
Mm-hmm.
uh there it's like, so there's one word called acha, and it's like acha, that means like okay, and sometimes
Mm-hmm.
acha means like I understood, and sometimes like acha, like really, things like that.
Right, right, right,
So
right. So
it's like, so one
different
word and
inflections, yeah.
different tones and different acha means like that. So that means like
Right,
really, like are you
right,
sure, things like that. So like it means like okay also I understood also, and really, are you sure?
right. And then if you
And
also said it in those two different tones, but in two different
yeah,
emotions, maybe you're really happy when you say it, or you're
and
confused when you say it. Different
and
mouth
sometimes
shapes.
angry also, really angry with the like
Yeah,
different tones in your like eye expressions, I would say, like eyebrow, facial
right.
expressions difference. Yeah. So in that case also, I think that is more or less with the computer vision kind of stuff, like deep learning to make that sort of things automatic in general. So I would like to know, like, if there is any researches are going on in AR VR also right now, because I feel that is kind of like future of entertainment technology now.
Right. I'm certainly encouraging that, and I've been part of experiments that, to work with AR and VR with characters continuing to be alive in that space. And the big mind change, and people in video games have been doing this for quite some time, but I'm trying to push even those folks into thinking about it at a more specific character quality level. But for people that were dealing with traditional filmmaking, it was a real change to think about how much high quality acting would be needed for a given experience. Like if you had a film scene of three characters sitting around a campfire and there's stories being told, for a piece of film for 5 minutes, say, with three characters sitting around the campfire, you might need maybe 8 minutes of performance animation, good character animation, because you'd have the 3 shot of the campfire and all characters. You might have a couple of 2 shots. You'd have the singles of the different characters talking or listening, and you cut that together. And for the 5 minute scene, maybe 8 minutes of really nice character animation. Now that you say it exists in a VR game, or in AR, where you could look wherever you want, or in robotics, where it becomes a walk into a physical space, that same 5 minutes needs 15 minutes, of high quality character animation, because they're all alive all the time. Because if you and I go into this, even if we go in alone, but if we go in together, I might be looking at the storyteller and you're looking over at one of the characters who's burning its marshmallow in the campfire and it doesn't realize it because it's listening to the story and you think that's funny. So anybody can look anywhere during that whole 5 minutes. So all the characters have to be alive all the time. Now, you know, some people, I worked with a video game group and, you know, when they were being sort of trying to be super efficient and not put that much effort into it, they would just have sort of automated rocking back and forth and little shifts in movement, and they considered, well, that's keeping the character alive. I really didn't think that was anywhere near keeping the character alive. It's not just, you don't have to keep it moving all the time, you have to keep it thinking all the time. So it might hear part of the story and be really afraid and like stop moving and just do a little head shift, and maybe it stops moving because it heard part of the story that scared it. Or it could really be distracted or fiddling with something, or two characters are sitting there and something is described that was really kind of awful in the story, and one of them is horrified and the other one giggles because it thinks it's funny. So making sure that they each are thinking and feeling all the time, not always just generally moving all the time, that's the separate kind of challenge. And so in AR and VR and walking into a space with autonomous robotics, the challenge is now that we need a lot more of the, even though it's heading towards autonomy, that each one is using systems that give it autonomy while it stays in character for who it is, and that its ability to not only speak the appropriate things to keep it in character, but have its active listening to what other people are saying also ring true for who it is as a individual character.
Yeah. So do you think it is more difficult within VR for those kind of like facial expression or body language generation than normal animation movies?
I don't think so. I really, you know, there's been, as VR was first coming out, there was some people were describing it as such a novel, crazy thing. They say, oh my God, it's most of it is first person. It's from your point of view, and everywhere you look, there's a world all the way around you. And my response is, well, that's default life 101. That's how I wake up every morning. That's how you wake up in the morning. I see through my eyes all day long, and everywhere I look, there's a world. It's like, we're not confused interpreting what goes on in our world. So I think if the makers of it stop thinking about it as like some crazy novelty, and they try to ground it in what we already have, you know, it's already ingrained in us as humans, how to read what's going on around us, and just interpret that the story is happening in that realm. And you have, you know, if you had to put on a show, and I've been to things, I'm sure you have, where you go, instead of a movie, you walk into a sort of an explorable theater situation, and actors around you are performing a story. You know, they can do that brilliantly, and they, you know, you can be guided to look at the right thing by virtue of who's you know, drawing your interest at that time. I was even in one situation where the audience was invited to, like, they came into a dining scene. It was called Tamara. It played here in LA for quite a few years, and it was quite brilliant. But you started the scene. The only rule for the audience, by the way, was you have to be quiet. You can't interrupt the actors. But you can go anywhere you want. You can follow any of the actors you want to anywhere in the whole building. And it was 2 stories and a mezzanine and a basement. So you can go anywhere you want, but just don't interfere with the actors and just be quiet. You are all ghosts in this world. But they started with everyone around a dining room, and you got to know each one of them as they were eating the meal together, and you heard the conversation going on, and you watched people, how they were reacting to what other people were saying. So it was all that stuff. It was what was being said, how people were listening, all the different kind of behaviors that were happening. And they got really high caliber actors and actresses to do this. And then dinner was over, and they'd get up and leave. So you suddenly had to make a choice, like, who am I following? And one is going up the stairs, and one's going down to the basement, and someone's going into a bedroom. And so you had to choose where to go. Now all of that worked beautifully. And by the end of a few hours, you came back together and there was a finale that brought all the characters back together. But it was great. You would get together with your friends and compare notes and like, oh, what did you see? It's like, well, where did she get the necklace? Oh, I was in this other room when he pulled it out from under the pillow. What? It's like people had such a good time discovering that world. Now that was all completely physical. You could go anywhere, do anything, and they pulled that off physically. That to me was doing immersive VR before it had the goggles associated with it.
So did you do like augmented reality with it, or the 360-degree mostly?
Oh, I've actually done some augmented reality, but I really love all of it, and I really feel like VR. I did something in the virtual room on Hollywood Boulevard. It's a company that has places around the world, and I've also did beta testing in the Void, which is associated with Disney, downtown Disney. But the virtual room, French-owned company, and they're in quite a few cities. I'm hoping after the pandemic that we can get back to going out and doing things like that. But eventually it's going to be plugged in, and some of it is already plugged into our homes. But they have a unique situation where it's a 10 by 10 walking space, 10 feet by 10 feet for each person, and you have up to 4 people can be companions on an adventure. They have the it was room scale, 5 room scale, and they really worked not to have latency. And it was a cord from the top down to your helmet, so you could quickly put it on and take it off. And you could walk around without ever tripping over it. And with 10 feet square, they had choreographed the visuals so that you could walk around with confidence. They would show the little grid if you got close to the wall, and if you bumped it, it was just cloth, so you weren't hurt anyway. But the wonderful thing about that was it just I was suddenly felt an absolute companion to the other people that were in my group, and part of it was the philosophy of how they built it, not the raw technology. The philosophy they implemented in their storytelling was that your companionship was the key to you getting through. It was almost like a big escape room adventure through time. And so you could be transported to different times, different places. Occasionally, like the two of us might be rendered really close together, so we could huddle next to each other, shoulder to shoulder, and I could show you a note written on a piece of paper. Other times it might render you like 200 feet away in a cave, and I have to call to you, and I have to try to throw you an object that you need. So they went through all these different configurations. They weren't stuck to one sort of reality at all. They were very adventurous with how many different ways they had you exploit the fantasy of VR, letting you be anywhere. But the thing they made consistent was companionship mattered. And instead of that, I've been through other ones where it didn't matter at all. It's like you and I could go in, you could be an avatar I don't really recognize. It's like, I don't know, Sruti was, were you like the 10-foot purple monster? I don't know. I'm not sure, because there were a lot of things. But I know I was shooting at stuff, and I think you were next to me shooting at stuff, or maybe it was somebody else. I don't know. But in this place, you had to talk to each other and communicate and figure out puzzles together. So even if you were strangers and you came in and did it together, you would really sort of get to know each other and have a companionship by the time you came out. That was a whole different way to use VR. It was to use VR to promote communication, connection, and togetherness, and you'd feel like you were victorious together, and when you come out, it was because you worked together that you succeeded. And so it's a very satisfying experience. Now, I've done some things that are more trippy, but I just love the idea of AR, VR being thought of as companion tools. If you wanted to show any of us something that you were really proud of, whether it was that scene outside behind you of near your building that happens for a short time, and you have that tree. You could go stand in that place and you want to show it to me, right? For you, you would want augmented reality just to add me, because you want to see your building and the beautiful tree and the fall colors, and you don't want any of that interrupted. So you want to see all of that, and you just want me added as AR, right? I'm the one little added element. I don't want any AR where I am. I want to completely feel like I'm standing under your tree with all the beautiful, colorful leaves above me, and I can look at all of them. So I want VR at that same moment. So if we plug in together where you do AR, I do VR, then we have this shared moment where it optimizes what each one of us wants at the same time. And we truly feel like we were together, way beyond if you only chose AR, there would be something separating. It's like you would add me, but I would, I don't know, add like your tree as a little decal in my room or something. It's like AR would not be satisfying for me. And if we both did VR, it wouldn't be satisfying for you either, because you have your actual place to go to. So the AR VR companion mix, I think, is something dynamic. I think I want to go and look deeper into, I think Microsoft Mesh is starting to play in those areas, but I think to really acknowledge its use for communication, for people to be together. I know that we usually talk about all this stuff in terms of the next video game or the next big, entertainment experience, and it's all cool for that. But I think, frankly, the bigger piece of the pie is once we implement that stuff, if we implement it well, it's just a ways that humans can be together anywhere in the world on a whim. And to me, just our human need to connect is a bigger piece of the pie than, and we also go see a movie or we go play a video game together. There's just talking to your friends, there's being with your family, there's having a celebration during a holiday where you couldn't get together, but now you are. It's like, to me, that's the bigger piece of the pie. But we're kind of using the entertainment and storytelling and AI character companion building as like the sort of the Trojan horse, if you will, in a good way, to sneak up on global communication being reinvented. But I also think that AI companion characters is a really ripe area that could be in augmented reality, virtual reality, and in reality. I think there's sort of a whole blended reality scenario where AI companion characters can be a really positive thing, or they can be completely negative too. It's not inherently one way or another. It's like if we with open eyes and with ethics, like we make it good, it will be good. If we don't, if we're there are a lot of people that would want to make it be like a glorified pop-up ad and manipulate you and just be horrible. So we have to protect at least one track of its evolution.
Yeah. And how do you think then, like, the future of storytelling I feel like nowadays, last year also, very few people was talking about AR/VR, like year before last year, 2019. And just after lockdown, people suddenly got into AR/VR now, which is kind of good thing. But yeah, I'd like to know, like, how do you think the future storytelling things are gonna be within AR/VR? Like if there some works are already going on or gonna happen.
I think it will become much more over the long haul. I think it will be very blended. I don't think we'll be making specific choices about which medium to use. I think, one of my tasks, and I can't go into the specifics of the exact story that I wrote for Disney, but one of my tasks was to write stories about the future and to, in that story, show how next-gen technologies as they bloom would be ubiquitous in our lives and change how we communicate and how we have shared experiences as families and friends and get to know each other. And so just in general, I without getting into the specifics of the stories that I wrote for them, I took the approach that AI companion characters in your home could be a positive thing, that both with the senior citizens that are finding it harder to get around, that there's assistance there with children, with learning companions, things like that. There was a great study that happened from Cynthia Breazeal. I'm trying to Breazeal. She was at MIT, and she did a presentation in 2019. I just loved what she had explored. She went through a presentation and she said, you know, transactional devices, we just push them towards social interaction. And then the ones that are capable of social interaction get much more of our engagement. And then empathy, empathetic companion ally emerged as being really important. And that having an AI entity admit its mistakes and ask for help was actually a positive thing and made people bond with it more, and actually do some helpings, do some training of the AI to help it not make the mistake next time. So there was some genuine help on both sides and more bonding. And she also proved, which was something that, gosh, you know, for years we've been using that in character animation in the Disney tradition of the illusion of life, but she proved it in a lab that behavior, gesture, was critical to enhancing the bond beyond just what the voice was saying or what it sounded like or what it said, that the gestural and expression elements caused a much deeper bond. And then that once that was in your environment, that you had this empathetic ally companion, that it also increased human to human interaction. It didn't make people stop dealing with each other. They would all be sort of happy and amused by their companion, and it would sort of coax them to talk more with each other as humans. Sometimes it's just about their own stuff, sometimes about what the AI character did in response to something, and it became a topic of conversation that then they could spring off into whatever direction they wanted. So I sort of took for granted that those evolutions of just it becoming part of our life would happen. And then that as we needed to connect with loved ones far away, it could just happen with whatever was the appropriate tool. And then when we wanted to have them join into an activity, like I was, for instance, doing a beta test at the Void before they opened it to the public. And I did happen to be in a video game scenario where I think it was in Star Wars, and I was shooting at some stormtroopers, and I thought, oh man, both of our sons are totally into video games. And I went, well, I don't want automated stormtroopers shooting at me. I want Wilder and Ian, our two sons, to be alerted. Hey, your dad's going into this space. He's like running around with a VR goggles and a pack on his back, but you can just jump into your PlayStation and like give him hell. So it's like they could be like, oh, cool. They're not running around in the space I am, but they log on and they start shooting at me, and they're like, I'm gonna get you, Dad. So it's like suddenly just to be able to have people that you know come plugging right into an experience that you might be doing, running around in a virtual world on your feet, but you have someone else that's plugging in just because they got alerted and they're on a game platform. And then somebody that might want to watch all of that. Like my wife she's prone to motion sickness. And so, you know, especially with systems that have a little latency, it really exacerbates people. If they're not scaled one-to-one and they have latency, there's a big problem with motion sickness. If they are scaled one-to-one and have taken care of latency, like when we went into the virtual room, I was telling you, we did 90 minutes without a break, and nobody got motion sickness. We did 2 45-minute adventures back to back, and one of the people on our team would get motion sickness every time we were on a boat, and he made it through fine. So if things are calibrated right, and again, the makers of it were not trying to startle your system. They were trying to start by saying, have your nervous system feel comfortable here. Okay, now that you just feel comfortable, I'm gonna take you on an adventure. Some people were like, I'm gonna change it so it's not how your eyes see the world. It's gonna be more wide angle. It's gonna be crazier. And when you move, you're gonna feel dizzy. It's like, okay, don't do that. Like, let my brain accept it comfortably, and then let's go on an adventure. So you can be in there for extended periods of time, but nevertheless, my wife has to wear glasses and stuff like that. So she'd rather not be either in the running around with the backpack on and the goggles like I'm doing, or to be doing a platform, video game platform to join in. But she'd like to see that. So I've also done some like dome projection projects and everything where you just put on simple 3D glasses and you have stereoscopic 3D view of a projection. So she could be sitting having tea and watching in stereoscopic 3D in front of her a life-size projection of me running around and my two sons like chasing me. And so she can look into my space all the way into their space as just one blended thing. And for her, all she had to do was sit and sip coffee and not have any of the stuff that make her sick, and just see it in beautiful projection on a screen. So that sort of blended reality thing, I think more and more is just gonna happen. I think people doing this, in entertainment, people doing like escape rooms. I think your AI companion with you, and then people that are doing the AR, VR companionship that I was talking about, where I'm in the escape room, I have AR adding my AI companion and you. And then we get to a position where I physically cannot unlock something and my AI companion can't either. But you, even though if you're in another country, you could walk up to a device, reach into it, take the key out, unlock the door for me, and then I can get into the next space. So you wouldn't just be there as a witness to the gameplay and the storytelling I'm going through. I would need you as my key navigator to get me through to the next space. Sometimes I could do it for you. Sometimes you far away could do it for me. So I think that kind of blended reality expectation for storytellers. So, for the storyteller making that escape room to say, I can only sell X amount of tickets for this space. I can only fit so many bodies in this room. But you know what? Somebody could have one person, I'm selling another ticket to somebody is not going to fly here and get a hotel and come into my escape room. They're going to stay at home. But I'm going to at a more reasonable price, but still it's a ticket sale. I'm going to sell more tickets than I could possibly put bodies in this room. And they're going to be companion players with the people in the escape room. And guess what? They don't just tag along. They're needed to have success in this adventure. So since they're necessary and engaged, they will participate, and their friends will want them to participate. When they start the trip to go to visit the physical escape room, they'll tell their friends, I'm going there. I need you to log on and help me get through this thing, because that's how it works. By the way, if we do that, it's going to unlock a new level in your video game and then we can go play there. So, you could make something where it's just so interconnected, woven together. I think that people will start to feel a much more of a freedom in how far storytelling and entertainment reaches, that it can have so many possibilities to break down like business models, where that one escape room business model can be sort of radically different from the ones that exist now that only need physical participants. You could do much more business than the ones that exist now, if it's done well. And so I think that more and more actors, for years I've been trying to encourage people in the acting community to stop thinking about avatars and computer graphics and immersion and autonomous characters and AI as their enemy. I, in fact, have been coaxing them. I wish we could have accomplished this at SAG, the Actors Guild, is to have people scanned every several years and have a beautiful avatar of themselves and archive that, so that as you go through the years as an actor, you can play yourself at different ages. And you don't have to put some kind of crazy makeup on. It's a beautiful digital representation of you. So, 15 years from now, they want a younger version of you. It's like, oh, I have that in my archive. I have the beautiful scan of me. I can just drive that all the way down to the micro expressions, and I'll play myself 15 years ago. Now, I talked to Rob over at Lucasfilm, and they had done The Irishman. And they showed a presentation of how they did the digital face replacement for De Niro and the different people in the film. And I told them that I had that mission. And I said, what would that have saved you if actors had taken that on, and that for years they were building an archive of themselves, so you didn't have to go through that arduous task of going through all their previous films and trying to get every little frame and put together an archive. They just had like beautiful scans of themselves waiting for you. And he said, oh my God, it would be millions of dollars and months we could have saved. And he said, I hope people do adopt that. So, and there are a few brave souls, and you know, Stash is one of them, who who understands that that is a future acting space. And very quickly, people are going to get bored with the novelty of immersion and want quality acting. It's like pretty soon you're like, yeah, I'm used to the person walking up and being in my face, but I'm bored with what they're doing. It's like, give me the Meryl Streep performance. So now you need somebody of the quality of Meryl Streep to come in and give you that performance. It's like the novelty of presence in VR. It's like, I know that. I've got a B actor doing a terrible performance in front of me in my face. Don't want that. It's like, oh, Meryl Streep is like mesmerizing me in the same room with me, and I feel her presence and she's a few feet away, and that emotion that I felt in the movie theater, I'm feeling with her. It's like, oh my God, the value of that is huge. So I think the actors feeling like that's going to be an interesting thing, which I would love to explore directly with actors, is what is it like for them to not have the sort of the preordained rectangle that they're on, the window of the storytelling, the view into the storytelling world, and they stop at that plane. What if they could come right up and each person would feel like they were the only one? Because of course in VR you could do whatever you want with this. Each one of the people, even if hundreds of people are feeling it, each one could feel like she only came up to them and only had the intimate, quiet moment face to face with them, and then could back up in the room and get into something more you know, theatrical and big, and then you could become aware of all the other audience members around you and now realize together as a group we're experiencing this big moment, and we sort of enjoy the social aspect of that. But when it comes to that intimate moment, you have the power in VR to just make it be truly a one-on-one experience. So, you know, I would love to see acting schools start to put their actors in VR and have them try with each other to say, okay, you know, you're my audience, I'm going to come up and perform this scene, and see like what are the parameters of invading personal space, what feels uncomfortable, what feels comfortable, how can you achieve the emotional bond in this free space, because it's like live theater plus, where you can be amongst the audience members and then have, whenever you want to, a one-on-one moment. Now, I've at times, back in the early days of my directing career, I just absolutely wished everyone could feel what I was feeling, because I, as director, I could just be huddled on the floor in the dark, like 5 feet away from two actors that are just having an amazing moment, and it's so emotionally powerful, and I'm right there. And I would just go, oh my God, I wish every person in the audience could feel this. I wish I didn't have to turn it into different shots and everything, because this is amazing. And when your actors they do that on the set. They're amongst people. You know, the whole crew is there. As director, I'm usually not sitting on a director's chair far away. I'm usually up close to them. And they fully are committing to the emotional thing. And you know, sometimes it's tears, and it's tears that are right close to you, and you just but they're not breaking the story. They're staying in the story space, and they're not acknowledging your presence. But I've just felt like there's such a power to that, and I would to me I'm anticipating a real magic moment happening that will unlock a whole new wave of storytelling in VR, when you can have that real dynamic presence inside of storytelling space with actors. But I also think there are things that people haven't tried yet that would be comfortable both with something like that, where you're aware of somebody like Meryl Streep's you know, performance prowess, and that she is in the story coming up and having this intimate moment, but then you do also have the power to have like her dissolve away and have it become darkness, and then just have what she's imagining, and to have like the inside of a dream of hers or something, you know, that also is completely possible. And so to me, all of that is not a problem. Or, you know, I hear so many people talk about, well, it's a problem because you can't have cuts. I did
I also
Don't
felt like a lot of times that like my vision is like what I am, the way I am seeing a particular site, or I am feeling while reading a particular story. I want to show people that like what I am imagining, what I am like seeing while reading this particular story. But it gets difficult when like some other people are reading that story. Their vision is different. So I want them to see my vision, and
well,
for
that's still
that
the
I
case though. You could still have your authorship.
yeah, so for that I thought like maybe AI and VR things will help to auto generate, like my imagination thoughts and sides, to like help it more into, like expressing my vision to others, like
Yes,
making
and
others see what I
yes.
am seeing.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that you're seeing it properly. I think some people feel the opposite. They feel like their ability to express their own individual vision is robbed because they think an AI is going to do it, like a system is going to do it, like they took it away from me. But I like the way you're expressing it, because if you help design the system, if you train the characters and you train the experience into the point of view that you want, then it will protect it, even if multiple people are there, there's only a few people or many. Um, it will keep your intention, your vision alive in an immersive environment. And so I do think you're right that you can maintain authorship
Spec-
and unique point of view.
Yeah, especially because like recently I saw a Stanford research, and they are doing some brain computer interface where you are imagining an word, and with the EEG signal, that word is getting into your machine. So so things like,
Nice.
yeah, things like that are happening,
Ah,
which I feel like very interesting, like to
yeah.
make AI do that things like translating your imagination to reality.
Yes. Well, I actually wrote a science fiction piece a few years ago, and it's not quite there yet, but we're heading towards it. My dream was nanobots go into your bloodstream, into your system, and they crawl and they park themselves on every one of your little nerve synapses, all the way through your nervous system. And if I want to, I can turn them all to receiver, and a video game platform could become the broadcaster to them and take me into a video game. So I just feel like my whole nervous system feels like I am there. Or that you say, well, I'm going to walk out to that tree. I'm going to take you to that tree. And I just see and hear and feel through you. So I'm looking through your eyes. When you touch the tree to
Yeah,
show me how rough the bark is, I feel that feeling on my hand. So it's not quite there yet, but I went like nanobots as being like receiver transmitters and receivers to completely connect all of us to other input, either each other or broadcasting devices. Is it's a little scary but exciting.
yeah, it is exciting. Yeah, but yeah, we are approaching the end now, and I don't want to end it. But anyways, we have to end the conversation now.
Okay, well, it's been a wonderful discussion with you, and yeah, you're right. There's so much more that we could get into. It's sort of
Yeah,
endlessly exciting. I'm so glad that you're one of the people that's going to be authoring with all these tools. And then a key thing is to for you to keep influencing how the tools are built. Don't just rely on a certain system was built by somebody and it comes to you, therefore it's worthy of being used. It may or may not have had people who have artistry and psychological depth and emotional sensibility and everything. They may or may not have been involved with designing it. So if it doesn't fulfill your needs, like push back, ask them to make the system do what you need it to do to get your intentions across.
and thank you so much for all the words. It's like great to listen to you, and being me, like I'm very crazy and daydreamer kind of person.
That's good. We need
and
that to guide this. Technology is going to be
and
boring unless dreamers are guiding it.
and yeah, and that actually brought me into the media technology research and entertainment technology things. Yeah, so it's great to listen to you, because like a lot of things I like could relate with my point of view things. And I
Mhm.
hope like whoever is listening to this will also be able to find something interesting, to like
Right,
approach a new research direction or something. Yeah.
right. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
you
Thank you
inviting
so
me
much.
on.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.